We are in our spiritual discipline series about practices that help us thrive in life. And last week, Pastor Brent was talking about some of the spiritual discipline, and I'm going to continue doing that today. And we defined a discipline. Now, people don't usually like talking about disciplines, right? Especially if you grew up in like a real tough household. It's like discipline feels like a bad word, but it's good. Discipline, training yourself to practice certain behaviors. And so a spiritual discipline is training ourselves to practice spiritual behaviors. That's what we're doing. But I know that when it comes to discipline, it can be hard, and sometimes your disciplines get out of whack. Like, becoming an adult really just means an endless set of disciplines you have to practice every single day until you die. And so it's like, do the laundry, wash the dishes, mow the lawn, put gas in the car, buy groceries, have a budget. And then you're also supposed to like eat healthy. Have you heard of this thing that you're supposed to do? Exercise, sleep 8 hours. There's just so many of these brush your teeth. Okay, how many of y'all been lying in the dentist chair? They're just like, do you floss? And you're like, yeah. Sometimes, right before I came. That's why my gums are bleeding right now. Okay, we have all these disciplines in life, and sometimes when life gets overwhelming, we can get easily frustrated. It can be really hard. And so I turned to my wife, and I was just like, can we just pick two things? Just two things that I'm gonna do. Like, I can have a good budget or an exercise, and then I'm not gonna floss or do any of the other things, right? I'm just gonna pick two disciplines and focus on those. It can be really hard because our willpower is limited. We usually use our willpower to do these disciplines. And what most psychological studies have found, like almost every one that's been coming out in the last 10 years, is that willpower is a limited resource. Willpower is only something we have so much of. Now, in the past, they thought, well, if you're a strong person, you have enough willpower to do anything you want, and it's infinite, and that's not true. Everybody has limited willpower. You have a finite amount of willpower that you have, and guess what? You know what makes it lower? Fatigue and emotional stress. And I don't know about y'all, I don't know any adults that are tired or stressed. Every adult that I meet is like, no, I've got 8 hours last night, feeling great, right? Okay, so if you're feeling emotional stress or any kind of fatigue, your willpower is limited. And it doesn't just apply to these disciplines like not budgeting or not flossing our teeth. It applies to our spiritual lives too. We want to be people that are more like Jesus. We want to be people that follow everything that we believe and everything that we care about. We want to be salt and light to a hurting world. We want to be great people, but we don't. It's really hard to be those kind of people. Like, think about it. You want to be like a nice, kind person, but then you drive and you leave this parking lot and you like give somebody the finger, right? I've been out there. Don't lie to me. Don't lie to me. Okay, but we want to be a good co-parent with our ex, but we can't help but be messy. We want to have a long-term, serious, settled-down relationship that ends in marriage, but we find ourselves jumping from person to person. We want to beat our addiction. We want to go past it. But we find ourselves back in the habit. We want to stop fighting with our spouse, but we cannot help but getting the last word. We want to be a good, caring friend, but we can't help but being petty sometimes. We want to be like Jesus. We really do. In our heart of hearts, that is really what we want. But we don't have the willpower to do it. And I just want to tell you, if you've been feeling bad about that, you can't have the willpower to do it. You don't have enough willpower. It's going to take more than willpower. And that's where things like spiritual disciplines come in, because they help form us into the kind of people that actually, naturally do good. The kind of people where we can actually do good without fighting ourselves to do it. And these disciplines can help us overcome our lack of willpower. See, we can be the kind of people that make the right choice even when it's hard. Is that the kind of person you would like to be? I know it's the kind of person that I would like to be, and that's why we're talking about spiritual disciplines. They help us thrive. They make us more like Jesus. They transform us into someone fundamentally different. But these spiritual disciplines don't just transform us. They also help anchor our lives. Okay, I was talking about willpower and chores and disciplines and all those things. But did you guys know that bad things happen in life? Has anybody in here ever had a bad thing happen to them? Okay, suffering, bad circumstances, it just keeps coming, right? And you're either, I've heard somebody say this, you're either going into a bad circumstance or coming out of a bad circumstance or in a bad circumstance, right? That just kind of happens to people. It's a normal thing that happens in life, and we can't control those things. But spiritual disciplines help us prep for the storms of life. This is how Jesus put it, and he's really smart. He said, everyone then who hears these words of mine and does them, his truth, the things that he's telling us to do, will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain fell, the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, but it did not fall because it had been founded on the rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell, and great was the fall of it. Spiritual disciplines can help us have a firm foundation in Jesus' truth so that we can be solid when these bad things that we know are going to happen come, and we don't have to fall apart. As a pastor here at CityChurch, I get to meet with you guys regularly, and it's one of the best parts of my job. But one of the things that I know is that these storms, these sufferings in life are like a pop quiz for our character. They come and then it tests who we really are. And a lot of times we just don't have the willpower. And when I say we, I mean we. I mean me too. I'm not separate from this. It's hard to have the willpower to act like Jesus because it might not be natural. So these spiritual disciplines help us prepare for the storms because we're becoming more like Jesus. And I'm not going to tell the story right now, but there's a great story in the Bible how when a big storm comes on a boat and everybody's panicking, I mean, the fishermen are panicking. Jesus is asleep. You know why? Because he's prepared for the storm. He doesn't have to worry about it. So these spiritual disciplines are incredibly important. And last week, Pastor Brent introduced us to one called gratitude, the attitude of gratitude. How did that go for y'all? Yeah? Does anybody, okay, this is participation. We can participate, okay? Does anybody want to shout out what they were grateful for last week? Just like yell it out. Everybody can go at once. It doesn't have to just be one person. What were you guys grateful for? Yes. That's what I'm talking about. I love that. And this week, I'm going to talk about a different kind of discipline because, see, an attitude of gratitude is the kind of discipline where we adjust our thinking to change our actions. The discipline I'm talking about today is the opposite. We change our actions to change our thinking. Our actions change our thinking. We adjust what they do. And Jesus modeled this one so well. And it's a discipline that will help us thrive in life no matter where we are. And it is the spiritual discipline of service. Serving. And Paul talks about how important serving is for followers of Jesus. He writes in the Christian scripture, the letter to Philippians, he says, "Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others." Now, Paul picks out two big barriers to why we aren't great at serving: selfish ambition and vain conceit. Now that sounds really extreme and kind of really bad, and you might not want to be the kind of person that goes, well, I have selfish ambition and vain conceit. You might not want to say that. So I'm going to break them down just a little bit. Let's ground it. This just means selfishness and pride. Selfishness and pride. So what does it mean to be selfish? When we're selfish, we do things that only benefit ourselves. What's in it for me? And that can be a driving force in our lives, especially in this era. Okay, can I preach for just a second? This part is free. This isn't even part of the message. We live in this hustle culture, girl boss era of get what you want and take it because nobody's gonna give it to you and it's yours to take and nobody's gonna take care of you. And look, I get it. Some of us have come from difficult circumstances and some of us were not helped out by our families and some of us are in tough spots. But I just wanna say, it's not all about you. It's just not. And this selfishness, and we can all be selfish at times, right? I get it. We can all be selfish at times, but it can be a driving force in our lives. And the more we practice it, the more it comes up in us when we don't want it to. And pride, I would just define it as thinking too highly of yourself. It can also look like a fear of looking bad. You have to maintain an image maybe that you appear a certain way, or that you're maybe better than others, that you're somehow elevated, and you're elevating yourself above people, and it's kind of natural, and it's pretty normal to have selfishness and pride be part of our lives. I don't know that we're ever going to be able to purge it completely, but what Paul is talking about is we got to look at these things. We got to look at the selfish ambition and vain conceit and not act out of them, not act out of those things. So when we serve, when we practice the spiritual discipline of service, it is a better way. It benefits us and it benefits others. It puts others' interests. When we serve others, it puts their interests above our own in an active, tangible way. Paul goes on. In your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus, who being in very nature a God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his advantage. Okay, think about that. Jesus is the ultimate example of service. And Paul is telling us we should follow his example. And Jesus is an incredible example. God became a man so he could serve and make life better for others. Because if we're being honest, if anybody could elevate himself, it's Jesus. If anybody could do something to benefit himself, it's Jesus. If anybody could think he was better than someone else, it's Jesus. I mean, he's literally better than us. That's why we sing songs of worship about Jesus. We don't sing songs of worship about John. He's better than us, fully man, fully God, but he did not cling to his advantage as God. He left it behind to come and serve us. Paul goes on, it's mind-blowing. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. Jesus humbled himself. He lowered himself, and he didn't use his God powers. And he allowed himself to be crucified despite being completely sinless. Every now and then when I watch a movie about the crucifixion or see it depicted or read about it, sometimes I just want Jesus to come off the cross and humble everybody. Sometimes I just want him to come off the cross and be like, you don't know what you do. Instead of you don't know what you do, I want to be like, you don't know what you do. And wipe everybody. That's just maybe me. And it's maybe not healthy. Maybe I have some anger stuff to talk about. I need to talk to Pastor Brent about that. But Jesus allowed himself, fully God, fully man, didn't hold on to these powers and allowed himself to be crucified in our place. And so maybe you're thinking, okay, that sounds great, John, but I'm not Jesus. This sounds great, and I get it. You might not have a lot of power. You don't have God power like Jesus had God power. It's not the same. And you might be thinking, I really feel like I got to hold on to what I got. I understand it. Okay, I get it. Letting go is not going to be easy. It's going to be hard. But I want to ask you the question, do you want to thrive? Do you want to thrive? And when you're ready to answer yes to that question, follow Jesus' example. Because when we cling to power, it breeds pride and selfishness in us. But we can choose faith, not in ourselves, but faith in him. Part of faith is trusting that Jesus is telling the truth. That Jesus has our best interest in mind and he knows what's best for us. And that can be hard sometimes, but I'm telling you, Jesus does know what's best for us. I am so stubborn sometimes. And sometimes it takes a long time for me to get that. And maybe you're like me, but I want to encourage you. Let it go. Choose to believe that Jesus is telling us the truth, that he knows what's best for us, that elevating others is better than elevating ourselves. When we elevate others, we grow in humility. When we elevate ourselves, we grow in pride and selfishness. We just do. Those actions form us. And they form us into the kind of people we want to be or the kind of people we don't want to be. The kind of people that can make the right decision, the kind of people that can't. That's why service is such an important spiritual discipline. It helps us be humble. By doing this action, it changes us from the inside out. But Jesus didn't just serve us in his death. No, he served with his life. He served not just us, but a bunch of people with his actions. And so as he's preparing for the crucifixion to be killed and then resurrected, Jesus gathers with his disciples and he establishes the posture of humble service for his movement going forward. Now, I want to take a time out because this whole scripture, this whole conversation always blows my mind. I can only do a couple verses today. I encourage you to read it, John 13, 14, 15. It's really good, okay? If you knew you were going to die, what would you take the time to do? What would you take the time to tell and show the people closest to you? It probably wouldn't be something like the ratio for the perfect peanut butter and jelly sandwich is 65% peanut butter and 35% jelly. Now that's true, in my opinion, but that's not what you would take the time to tell people. You would only take the time to show people and tell people what really, really mattered. What really would make a difference. And that's what Jesus is doing. Okay, so let's go to Jesus' time. Come with me to Jesus' time for a minute. Everybody wore sandals. There was no concrete, there was no asphalt, and so everybody walked around on dirt. And what happens when you walk around in dirt with sandals? Your feet get dirty. It was just a part of it. And then I don't want to talk too much, but you had like animals everywhere, and there's all this stuff that you might step in. People had gross feet. It was just a part of life. And so when you were a guest in someone else's home, you washed your feet. You washed your feet. Now, if you were rich, you had a staff of servants. You had a bunch of people who you employed who would be there and take care of everything. And when you had servants, the lowliest servant, like the newest person hired, like today's your first day, your job is washing feet. That's what the lowest servant's job was, to wash people's feet, because it is a bad job. It is a dirty job, okay? If you didn't have enough money to have a servant like most people, you would just put out like a wash bin at your front door and a towel so that people can wipe their feet off when they come into your home, because you don't want them tracking all this dirt into your home. It was a do-it-yourself thing, okay? This was super common because of how they ate, they reclined, their feet were all over. And it's like today, we take off our shoes in some people's houses, right? You don't want to track all the dirt from the outside in. So Jesus comes to this event that we call the Last Supper, which is his last dinner with the disciples. It's what I was just talking about. But nobody washed their feet. And so they're sitting at this dinner and nobody's washed feet. And the disciples aren't thinking about like serving, they're thinking about who's the greatest. Because they think Jesus is about to like be the king. And they're kind of going, jockeying for position of like, I think I could be like his vice president. And if you support me for vice president, like maybe you could be like the secretary of the state. And I know I'm using American government terms, okay? That's not really what they're talking about. But they're going, hey, who's gonna be the greatest of us? So these 12 guys are kind of jockeying for position of trying to see who the greatest of them was. They wanted to know who the greatest was, who was gonna have the most power when Jesus came into his kingdom. But Jesus flips their mindset. Jesus washed their feet. He washed their feet. He took the lowest job, the job that nobody in that world would have wanted to do, and he washed their feet. And in this act, he shows them that following Jesus isn't about glorifying yourself. It's not about trying to be the greatest. It's not about talking about who's the greatest. But it's about humbling yourself in service to others. This is what happens, and this is what Jesus said. You call me teacher and Lord, and rightfully so, for that is what I am. I mean, he's telling them, yeah, I'm the boss of this place, man. I'm the guy you're following. I'm everything you say I am. I'm that guy. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you should also wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. Very truly I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor is the messenger greater than the one who sent them. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them. When we serve, we're following Jesus' example. When we make service a spiritual discipline, something that we do actively, regularly in our lives, we become more like Jesus. And it changes us. It changes us. I can't tell you how many times that I haven't wanted to do good, and then I do good, and I'm a better person. That's just what Jesus is telling us. And don't miss this. Jesus explains, I'm being an example. He's not saying literally the job of every Christian is to always wash people's feet. He's not being literal about that, because I know some of y'all have weird feet stuff in both directions, in bad and in not good ways. So you don't have to wash everybody's feet. He's saying, I'm an example. I took the lowliest job, and I am the greatest in this room. I served you. Now serve others. He's being the example. It's a pattern of behavior to follow. And if Jesus was a servant, we should be a servant too. Is anybody in here greater than Jesus? The servant is never greater than the master, right? And he is the Lord. He's our master. So we can be servants too. But one of the coolest things, this is what's so cool about Jesus. And if you're a skeptic, and if you're reading this, you're like, oh, I don't believe it. Cool, I'm glad you're here. Maybe you got dragged here with the promise of Memorial Day barbecue. Maybe you're visiting a family member, whatever. If you don't believe it, I'm glad you're here, because I'm so glad that this is a place you can explore our faith in Jesus. Because here's what's so cool about Jesus. It comes with a promise. He's not telling you to wash feet just because it's good for you, and it is. He's not just telling you because it's good for others, it is. But it comes with a promise. He says, you will be blessed. When you serve, you will be blessed. God's favor will be a part of your life. You will be blessed because you are a blessing. All right, now we're in a place where you guys get to actually say something. Are you ready? Okay. This is like a call and response, and there are a lot of people usually with darker skin tones that are like, yes, I'm ready. Okay, here we go. You say it, I'll repeat it. Okay, I'm gonna say the first part, you say the second part, all right? Are we ready? I'm not as convinced about this side of the room. Okay. So I'm gonna say the first part, you say the underlined part. So I'm gonna say when I'm a blessing, you're gonna say I will be blessed. When I am a blessing, I will be blessed. That's right. Think about that. Believe it. When you are a blessing, you will be blessed. And you can be a blessing. It is blessed to be a blesser. That's what Jesus is talking about. When you serve others, you will be blessed. And I don't know what this is look like, okay? For some reason, as Americans, we're always like, oh, that means money. I'm gonna serve others, I'm gonna get some money. There's probably not gonna be a check in the mail. And if there is, 10% of it at least should go to CityChurch. And if you could write care of Pastor Jon on there, that would be awesome. But here's what's crazy about that blessing, is sometimes it's something that you never would have expected that happens within you. It's not something that comes to you from the outside world, like there's gonna be like a Ferrari parked in your driveway. Because let me tell you, have you seen the gas mileage on those things? I don't know that that's a blessing in this day and time. I mean, you could look at it and it looks cool, but you'll never drive it. Or a boat or something like that, because they say the best thing that could happen to you is when your friend gets a boat. Yeah, think about that one for a second. Your blessing might not be material blessing. It might be something within you that changes, where you're formed and you become a different kind of person. And so this is what I'm asking you to do. I want you to develop the spiritual discipline of serving in your life. And your willpower is never going to be higher than it is right now. The minute you leave this place, I'm the same way. I get home. Okay, can I tell you guys a not flattering story about Pastor Jon? When I get home after I preach, sometimes I want a nap. And if my kids are too loud, I get so mad. And so I'm up here being like, look at me, I'm a pastor, I'm holy. And then I'm home and I'm like, if you guys don't stop playing Fortnite, I'm taking away all your devices and I'm burning them. Yeah, let's go. Just a nap for daddy, that's all I want. Okay. Your motivation to do this is never going to be higher than it is now. And so get into the habit of serving. Sign up for something, commit yourself to something, and there's a lot of tangible ways you can serve. So we have a social action team that presents monthly serving opportunities. It'll just always tell you when these opportunities are going. It's not like a commitment where you gotta show up at a place or a time. It's just gonna let you know. You can talk to Jennifer Nava outside at the Feed SA booth and she can tell you how to get on that list. We have QR codes. I don't think it's on the QR code right now, but we'll figure that out. There's another thing that's gonna be happening in the fall that happens a few times a year, is that we go to Mexico to visit with Casa Hogar and do like construction and projects there. And I want to encourage you to get involved. Not everybody can go, all right? But if you are somebody, and can I talk to the men for a second? Actually, you know what? I'm not gonna be sexist. Let me talk to the men and the women. If you can swing a hammer and do like some construction-y kind of stuff, that would be really helpful for Mexico. Because, okay, every person I know that's good at building stuff doesn't like to talk to people. And they're generally just like, if I could just like hammer some stuff, and if I could, and then you go and you look at what they've done and they're like, I actually built her own waterfall shower and it was amazing, and it took me 5 minutes. Okay, so if you're somebody who's really handy and can fix things and can build things, Mexico's a really good place for you to do that. And if you've been wondering where you can go where you don't have to like be on stage and talk to a bunch of people, that's a really good place to do it. You can serve in anonymity. But I also want to tell you that Feed SA Collection is next week. And this is an incredible opportunity to use your resources to serve. 20% of kids in our city will not have enough food this summer, period. So if you're eating every day, you're better off than about 20% of the kids in our city. And I want to ask you to show up. You can bring cans. You can bring money. You can also serve and help us in doing that. So I want to invite you to be a part of that. These are actions that will like start to change you in the inside, okay? The spiritual discipline of serving is so good, and these are ways to kind of kickstart it. But once we get it in us, it becomes a posture, because one of the things that I know is that it's really hard to serve the people you love the most. When it's an orphan in Mexico, it's a lot easier than when it's one of your own kids, or when it's your spouse, or when it's your parent. And so I want to challenge you to have a posture of service, of elevating their needs over our needs, of becoming a servant, of grabbing the towel to serve and wash feet in your everyday life, in your marriage. Okay, I'm going to get on the dudes for a second. And I'll get on the ladies too, don't worry. Okay, but dudes are always like, man, I would die for my wife. Bro, you won't watch Bridgerton with your wife. You're not going to take a bullet for her if you're not going to watch her favorite Netflix show. And ladies, okay, you laugh too hard at that, ladies, okay. It's a lot easier to just be like, man, he never does nothing around here, and I have this whole list of 35 things he was supposed to do this weekend, and why didn't he do it? Okay, I'm asking, posture of service, elevating their needs above your own. What about in your workplace? What if you showed up as a servant in your workplace? Okay, young people, what about with your teachers? What if you served your teachers instead of expecting your teachers to serve you? What about in your home? Okay, parents, what about with your kids? What if instead of holding power over their head, you serve them? No, I'm not saying no discipline, but don't hold the power over their head. Serve them. Lower yourself. Put their needs above your own. Put their needs above your own. And when you practice that spiritual discipline of serving, your life will be better. You will be blessed. And I promise you, I've been saying a lot about married couples, your marriage will be better when you serve your spouse. It just will. Jesus tells us, but do we believe him? We have to believe him and build this spiritual discipline of service in us so we could be molded into the kind of people that make the right decision when the time comes. You know, we have this Feed SA thing, and y'all are incredible. Truly some of the most generous people that I've ever encountered. Every year, the Food Bank, which is this nonprofit that's an incredible nonprofit, works with us to do this because of you. We say that we be the church. Like, the church is not a building. This church is not a service. This church is not a 501c3 organization formed in the state of Texas in 1992. The church is you. You are the church, and you fill these buckets. And you give of your money. And I know people that don't have a lot of money that still throw down $5 to provide 35 meals for people. I'm wearing a bracelet right now of a little 9-year-old girl who was making bracelets for Feed SA. She sells them for $2, and she can't keep up with selling them, actually. It's crazy, so don't buy any from her. But here's the point. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter what you have. You can be a blessing for others. You can do it. And I want to ask you, church, Feed SA is here, and we can bless people as City Church in a way that will shine a light in our city, that makes people at the food bank and other nonprofits and even other religious organizations going, what are they doing over there? I want to be more like them. That's what it means to serve City Church.